Hello, and welcome to the first official episode of Reading Too Much Into It. My name is Zane, and as I said, this is our first video, and I'm very excited to have you all here. Well, those of you who are watching, and those of you who hopefully will watch in the future, because I hope that this channel will ultimately deliver everything that I have set out for it to deliver. That being, discussions that I hope that I, as the man talking to you, on your tablet, phone, or computer can deliver to you, and you, as the person who will hopefully be typing respectful replies in the comments. I hope that that is the case anyways. And as you may have seen from the thumbnail, and I believe I stated it in the intro video, which you should definitely check out if you want a slightly longer version of what I just said about what this channel will be about, then we are going to be talking about character deaths in Bleach, specifically the way that Kubo chooses to write his character deaths compared to what I see in a lot of mainstream media, like comic books, television, movies. I think that the way the deaths are I think the way that the deaths are written in Bleach are different enough that it warrants discussion, and I think that should be a fun discussion, because one thing that I want to establish before I proceed with this video is that I am not advocating one way or the other. Like a Kubo death, for instance, I'll probably never say that word again, but just so that you know what I'm talking about, the deaths that I believe that are unique in Bleach, I'm not advocating that they're inherently better than the other types of deaths that I will talk about or anything like that. I just think that they're different enough that we can talk about it. So with that out of the way, let's dive right in to character deaths in Bleach. So the primary differences for me, that I noticed, first watching Bleach and then reading it, was that the deaths seemed to the deceased characters are always left unfulfilled. Their deaths are usually abrupt, or they are they're killed more often than not. They don't want who wants death, but they are usually in a situation where they're fighting for survival, and then they die. They were just not lucky enough. Not that luck usually has anything to do with it, but they were not the universe's favorite enough to survive. It essentially is where I'm getting at here, and I want to go ahead and compare this to a lot of, I said, mainstream deaths. And I know that obviously there's plenty of Kubo deaths, there I said it again, elsewhere in media. Obviously people get killed in media, that's no big shocker. Everybody who's ever seen any slasher movie knows that. But media like Bleach, comic books, superheroes, anime, manga, they tend to have another type of death, which I think is the most prevalent. And the example, and it's a big example that I'm going to be using when comparing the Bleach deaths to, is Avengers Endgame, which I'm assuming most of the people watching have either seen or know the ending to, because that's what I'm going to be spoiling. But in case you haven't seen it and you don't know the ending, but you are interested in seeing it, then you might just want to skip this video. I apologize, and in the future I will try to make videos that avoid having to reference other materials that I know my audience will be interested in. But I'm just going to assume that most people know the ending of Infinity War, even if they haven't seen it or aren't interested in it. Okay? So you've had your official spoiler warning. So Tony Stark's death at the end of Infinity War, or I'm sorry, not Infinity War, Endgame. I might have to edit that or put it in the description or in the beginning. But Tony Stark's death at the end of Infinity War, at the end of Endgame, is, I might have to edit this whole part out. But his death at the end of Endgame is essentially a sacrifice. It's a suicide. He performs the snap knowing the consequences. Tony Stark is prepared to die to kill Thanos, to destroy Thanos' army, to save the universe, to save his loved ones, to save everybody, obviously. That's encompassed in the universe. But it's a death that he performed on himself. Like, he wasn't like, okay, I'll do this, but I'm like hoping I'll survive. Like, I'm pretty sure that Tony Stark in that moment knew the consequences were like definitely going to equal his death. And I know that like in possibly in some other Marvel installment he might still be alive, but let's just operate under the assumption that he is dead, right? So what makes that death different from, say, any given death in Bleach? Well, like I just said, like when I was laying out like why I think Bleach deaths are different, is that like they're usually abrupt and they usually leave the character unfulfilled. But whereas like with Tony Stark, well, not really, because like he was very fulfilled. Like he had existed for like so long, and he finally died like saving like stuff, like saving the people and like the universe that he loves. And I'm assuming he loves the universe because that's where his favorite people are, his loved ones. So in a way the audience kind of gets, I don't want to say closure. I mean, I think it was very like his death was very, how do you say, like finished. Like I was in the theater, I wasn't like, but what about Iron Man 4? You know what I mean? Like, and so I think that by doing that, by letting Tony Stark die a mostly fulfilled person, it kind of takes, and knowing that he did this to himself willingly for a good cause, adds to like this, or removes actually this degree of sadness. Like, I am obviously like, it was a very emotional moment and everything, but in the theater I remember thinking like, wow, this is sad, but like it was for a good cause. It was like a good ending to his saga. It was a really good death. And so I think that, but like by making it his autonomous choice to do it, you lose an element of tragedy. And like I said at the beginning, I am not advocating for one way or the other. I am just simply stating what I'm observing. So like, I'm not saying that like by losing an element of tragedy, like the movie missed out on something. Like, like his death would be. I remember joking about this. Like, what if he just got decapitated by Thanos? Like very unceremoniously. That would be more of like in line with like a Kubo death, which I will explore further as this video goes on. Because the three main deaths that I want to compare Tony Stark's to are Gin, Yamamoto, and Ulquiorra. And I know that I didn't list those in chronological order. I'm actually going to save Ulquiorra for last because I think that his death is actually kind of different enough, and I think it's purposefully different, mind you, than the others. But I'm just going to focus on Gin and Yamamoto, and then we can cover Ulquiorra because I need to establish a baseline before I can show how Ulquiorra kind of like subverts that baseline, that gold standard of Bleach deaths. So with Gin, at the end of the Deicide arc, we discover that Gin had this intricate plan, this double agent Judas like super awesome plan to, I so sorry for the incoherent words I just said, but he is revealed for the whole reason he joined up with Aizen, the whole reason he went along with Aizen, the whole reason like he like became Aizen's best friend was so that he could ultimately kill him by learning Kyoka Suigetsu's weakness and then using his Zanpakuto's hidden ability to kill Aizen. And this is all played out very, very well and all. And I mean, I can't imagine, like, I remember, okay, so truth be told, I actually had this part spoiled for me. So I didn't really think that, like, it was going to work. But I can't imagine that with a villain as, like, built up and well established as Aizen, that people thought this was going to not end in tragedy for Gin. But anyways, so on that note, because Aizen had fused with the Hogyoku, every time he is about, I guess like not about to die, but like in a position where he could die, maybe. I can't exactly remember the rules of the Hogyoku. The Hogyoku forces him to evolve, and so that's what happens. He goes from like the just out of chrysalis state, like mullet, like David Bowie looking Aizen, to like what he's affectionately named Butterflies, and like he has like the butterfly wings and everything like that, and he kills Gin like in retaliation for almost killing him. And it's So Gin dies, being like cradled by Rangiku, and it's a really like twist the knife in moment because all Gin's death really succeeded in was making Aizen stronger. Like Aizen wouldn't have evolved at that moment. He by the time Ichigo arrives, he would not. He would still be just out of Chris like David Bowie Aizen. He wouldn't be butterflies in. I love that word. By the time Ichigo arrives, had Gin not betrayed him when he did, and so it makes you wonder like, did Gin like actually like make things worse with his death? And if he did, then like that's very like a cruel thing to do to like your character who's like been like plotting against this guy for over 100 years because of what he did to Gin's childhood friend Rangiku. And so I think that like by doing this, like you kind of like as opposed to like Tony Stark's death where it felt like very like he died, but at least he died with a purpose. Like, you know what I mean? It's tragic that he's dead, but an even bigger tragedy would be to let Thanos like on the loose and like let Thanos fulfill his goals. But no, like Gin just made Aizen stronger, and I think that is a sort of like Kubo death. He dies unfulfilled, and now, but he doesn't necessarily die without closure because it is worth mentioning, and it's a very cool scene that as he dies, he sees Ichigo arrive. Ichigo after his Dangai training, and he's like, he recognizes that Ichigo is a lot stronger and recognizes that he can potentially defeat Aizen. I can't remember if he like thinks that like you could defeat Aizen or that he will defeat Aizen, but either way, I think he dies with the knowledge that he can safely pass on this task to Ichigo, and obviously that's exactly what happens. And so I think Gin died with closure, but he definitely died like with like all his plans just like flushed down the drain, like over 100 years, which might not be that long to like a Soul Reaper, but yeah, like he just loses out on like so much. And like the cherry on top, and I keep restating this because it's just so like messed up, is that he just made Aizen stronger. Like maybe Ichigo wouldn't have had to use Mugetsu had he not already been in butterfly state like when the fight began. So I don't know about that. And I don't also like maybe Gin actually succeeded in helping Ichigo's friends like live because Aizen was actually about to kill them before Gin betrayed him. And but then I don't know, because like they seemed like they were resourceful enough, and Aizen was drunk enough on power that like I could imagine if one of them like engaged in a conversation with him, he would actually like take part in it, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But yeah, so that's Gin's death, as opposed to Tony Stark's. And so the next death that I want to talk about, the next like major death, I'm going to be talking about quite a bit of death in this episode, but the three big ones, like as I said, are Gin, Yamamoto, and Ulquiorra. So on to Yamamoto. His death comes towards like the beginning, middle-ish of the Thousand Year Blood War. When I was reading it at the time, like I kind of lost track of like where like how long ago it had been. Like when I read the ending of the arc, I kind of lost track of how long ago he actually died. I know he definitely died like before like the end game, obviously, because then they go up to like the Zero, like, or the Royal Palace and everything. But after his death, his death is like really sucks because he is fighting who he believes to be Yuha. He actually uses his Bankai against him, and it's a really cool scene, and I can't wait to see it animated. But it turns out that the guy he's fighting isn't even Yuha. It's just one of Yuha's minions who like disguised himself as him, and that like the real Yuha had been off like trying to recruit Aizen, and like when he goes back up and sees Yamamoto like having defeated his clone, he's like, "Oh, you suck," and then kills him. Like I wish it didn't play out like that, like a little bit. I wish it was a little bit more like your classic anime rivalry, but like he just like he insults the guy and then he kills him. Like it's like a very low effort thing for Yuha, as opposed to like what you might expect from like this like like it's been 1,000 years like since these guys fought, and like you kind of like as like the reader, like you're trained to believe that like because it's a shonen, and Bleach isn't, I wouldn't say exactly 100% known for subverting a lot of the classic shonen tropes, that like like these guys are gonna have like they're gonna have to duke it out in like a really like epic fight, and Yamamoto might lose that fight, but like there might be like a mutual respect there, but there's not. Like Yuha like kills him, and then that's it. Like, he insults him for like changing and like growing like apparently like weaker since then, and like how like criticizes him for not letting Orihime heal his arm, and it's just like it's a disrespectful death, and like the way he dies is like Yamamoto, like the strongest captain of the 13 like captains of like the court guard squad like at the time. I'm not about to debate like who's stronger now, but he dies like failing to protect Soul Society, and as far as he knows, like he doesn't see like Yuha like retreat, so like he dies like thinking what I imagine is that like he's failed everybody, and that like the universe is essentially going to end because he fell to him. And I think that that's really tragic. And like once again, to compare it to Tony Stark died like seeing the fruits of his labors. Like he like Thanos disappeared before Tony died, so like Tony can at least rest knowing that like what he did worked. You know, Yamamoto, like on top of the verbal abuse he's suffering from Yuha, like dies knowing that like he let everybody down when his job is to not let everybody down, and like explicitly like his job is like the last line of defense of Soul Society. Well, not the last line. There's the Zero Squad, but like you know, like as far as he's aware, like in that moment, like because he thinks the Quincy's without him will just overrun the Sarite, like he like as their last line of defense is just gone, and there's nothing stopping Yuha at this point. And so yeah, like I know I used like a lot of like colorful like playful like words there, but and like I don't want to like you know like talk like I don't want to make too light of like because like these are like tragic scenes, and like my suspension of disbelief like wasn't really like that broken like while I was reading this or anything like that. But like I don't mean to sound detached. Like when I was reading this, it was very emotional. but but I think it's like just so interesting like how like Kubo like when he kills these characters he like inserts the knife, but then he like has to twist it by like you know like letting them down somehow. And so that on that note, let's talk about Ulquiorra, who, like I said, like I wanted to establish like a sort of bedrock with Gin and Yamamoto, but now on Ulquiorra's death, it's interesting because I believe that, and I say I believe, like, but I think that most people who watched or read Bleach, like the moment of Ulquiorra's death, kind of like thought that it was like self-sacrificial, that Ulquiorra knew he was going to die. So Ulquiorra dies actually saving Orihime and Uryu from full hollow Ichigo. Like when he's like completely feral and he's like attacking the both of them, Ulquiorra appears behind him, and as Ichigo is charging a Sarah with his horns, he cuts off one of the horns, I guess destabilizing the Sarah. I kind of wish they had established that's how Sarahs work beforehand. Maybe Kubo did, I can't remember, but anyways, the Sarah like leaks out on the two of them, and Ulquiorra had established earlier that he can regenerate, just not vital organs, like I think the brain and the heart he can't do, or something like that, or maybe it was just all organs. Anyways, so Ulquiorra like regenerates on the outside, and he appears like he's fine, and then you know, as everybody knows, he starts to disintegrate, and it's it's probably like the most famous death of Bleach, and I think definitely the most impactful because like I said, like Bleach isn't really known, like you know, like I think that like for like you know Hunter x Hunter, you know, you might expect that to be the case, but like because that's known for kind of like subverting your expectations, which I know is like an overused term, but it's true. Like it's known for kind of like going left when you think it's going to go right, and so you know like Byakuya, who Ichigo had fought in like a parallel like sort of like fight scene like climactic like clash in the Soul Society arc, is now like one of Ichigo's allies, like, and you might expect the same thing to happen to Ulquiorra, but no, like he like starts to disintegrate kind of like Thanos in in Endgame, but he dies though, and it's self-sacrificial, so obviously he brought this on himself. Like I think he knew what he was doing, but he dies like after finally understanding what Orihime meant about like the heart, like the human heart, and like he dies like reaching out for her, and it's like for me Ulquiorra probably had like a new lease on life in that moment. Like he could probably like you know he's known for like being like the embodiment of nihilism, but like he could go on after that point like with the knowledge he has now like from his like battle with Ichigo and incorporate that into like bettering his life, possibly. I mean, obviously we don't know because he's dead, but that's the real tragedy, is that like he had to die at the exact moment he finally realized what everybody was talking about. And I think that that's like definitely like a tragedy. And so I think that like while Ulquiorra's death is like different, it's still technically like a Kubo death because he dies like so like unfulfilled. And now I I think I made a mistake earlier by referring to non-Kubo deaths as like mainstream deaths, because we can all think of like deaths kind of like Kubo deaths. Like, I don't want to spoil anything more than I already have with Endgame, but like if you've seen like a lot of like other anime, like possibly like I'm just gonna ballpark out some like Full Metal Alchemist or Code Geass, then you know what it's like to see a character die like against their will, like unfulfilled. But like self-sacrificial deaths are very common in like mainstream shonen, like Naruto and like One Piece, and so and like I think even in like comics like Tony Stark's death. So it's like, so what I'm getting at here is that like is that the most of the deaths in Bleach seem to abide by like this Kubo death sort of situation. And I'm just going to rapid fire go through the Espada, and I'm obviously going to bar Grimjow and Holly Bell because they, as we know, they survive until and well, I mean they still survive after the 1,000-Year Blood War. And I'm going to bar Ulquiorra as well because we just talked about him, and I'll bar Noitora, which I'll explain after we get to him. So I'm going to start from Aranero and end at Yami. So Aranero dies after a very surprise like attack to the head by Rukia, who he's hoisting up on Kai and Shiba's trident, and or Zanpakuto rather, and he dies like wailing and like screaming for help. It's actually kind of like a really disturbing scene. Like Aranero wasn't a sympathetic character at all, so like I didn't feel, but I still like kind of like felt bad, like in like the sense of like, wow, I wouldn't wish this pain on my worst enemy kind of way. And same thing with Szayelaporro, the Eighth Espada. He dies in like a really like torturous, like dread type way, where like his like sense of time is completely like modified to where like a second feels like 100 years as Mayuri stabs him through the heart. So like it's like very like Black Mirror ish like type death. And then Zomari dies like after like pleading with Byakuya and like explaining like, hey, like like just because you're a Soul Reaper doesn't mean you have to kill me. Like like nobody's like paying you specifically to kill me. And to which Byakuya like says like, no, I'm killing you because you tried to kill Rukia. But he dies like kind of like bargaining for his life, or like trying to like again, I shouldn't be laughing, but like and then he starts like to praise Aizen as he dies. So like I think there's like a little bit of acceptance there, but like either way, like this man like clearly didn't want to die, and it was like his life was just straight up denied. And so Noitora is the exception because like Szayelaporro is like pretty bad, and I'd say like probably like Szayelaporro, Aranero, and Noitora are like all like pretty bad people, like, but like, and Aranero and Szayelaporro got like kind of deaths like, I don't want to say befitting, because like I said, like I wouldn't wish like Szayelaporro's death on my worst enemy, and I wouldn't wish like Aranero's pain on my worst enemy. But like out of all the, I don't know, Noitora, I guess what bugs me, and like not in like the bugs me in like the sense of like Kubo definitely should have done my idea because I'm a way better writer than him. Like like, no, I'm not saying that, but like when I was watching it, I remember at the moment thinking that like, if Szayelaporro gets like that death, then Noitora is definitely getting a really bad death. But no, he doesn't. He gets the exact kind of death that he wants. And I might make a separate video on like edits to Bleach that like I personally would make, and I think I would definitely edit Noitora's death to make it more not torturous, but just like more like him not getting what he wants, because he's kind of like portrayed as like this like misogynistic like scumbag. So like I don't know, it kind of seemed like a little like I didn't want him to get the death that he wanted, like the warrior's death that he wanted. But anyways, moving up the list to number 2, because like we're skipping Ulquiorra and Holly Bell. Number two, Baragon. He dies pretty unfulfilled. It's revealed that Aizen had usurped all of Hueco Mundo from him, like, way back in the past, and that ever since then he's been kind of like scheming, kind of like Gin, like looking for an opportunity to kill Aizen. And as he's dying because of like what Hachi did to him, he's like, all right, well, it's now or never. And he hucks his axe at Aizen, and it obviously fails. The axe, like, I think he even disintegrates before it even reaches him, and he like dies. Like, Aizen doesn't even, like, I don't think looks at him really. I could be mistaken on that, but like Aizen doesn't like pay him any sort of mind as he dies, and like that's tragedy in and of itself. Like, like, I can't say for certainty who would have been a better ruler because I'm not well versed in the politics of hollows, but and I don't want to say anything like with authority, like I like read like I wrote the textbook on all of this, but it's like tragic because like he died like knowing that like he came absolutely nowhere close, that like the fact that Aizen didn't even pay him any attention, like if he couldn't beat Aizen with that sneak attack just then, like how could he have ever hoped to defeat Aizen any, like how else was he gonna do it, like essentially? Because if the way I figured it, if Soifon's Bankai could injure Baragon, and Aizen allegedly could use his spirit energy to negate Soifon's Shikai, there's a very good possibility Aizen's spirit energy could negate anything Baragon could throw at him. I could be mistaken. Like I said, I'm not here to debate power levels or anything like that, but there's a very good chance that Baragon knew this and like thought that maybe his only chance was a sneak attack, and then that he saw that fall through, and then he died. So I don't have anything more to add on to Baragon. So on to Stark. He possibly has, in my opinion, like probably the most tragic death out of all of these, maybe except for Ulquiorra. He definitely has, like, he's definitely a sympathetic character in that, like, he has like the I'm not even supposed to be here today like energy about him, and this is kind of shared with Shunsui, who he fights and is ultimately killed by. And what sucks for him is that like Stark's whole shtick was that he was lonely, so he literally used a piece of his soul to create another being to be his best friend, that being possibly being Lilinet. I think it's intentionally left in the air of which one of them was the original, or even if either of them were the original, or maybe when he took the soul out, they kind of became different beings. I guess that's kind of up in the air, but let's just assume Stark is the original because he's the bigger one. And yeah, so Stark like dies like like kind of in like a state of loneliness that he was at the beginning of his life, because Lilinet has already been dead at this point, and he like passes away like by himself. Like he dies like a lonely death, which really sucks. And it sucks for one thing because it's not like he, like all of them, like he didn't, except for Ulquiorra, he didn't sacrifice himself for like a noble cause or anything like that. Like he was actually kind of starting to like criticize Aizen towards the end after Baragon died. He was like, wow, like jerk, like you can't even like say anything about like your fallen comrade or our fallen comrade as our leader. Like, no? Okay. And so I guess like it's just like I said, like compared to Tony Stark's death, like for nothing, like it he doesn't have like closure. He dies like pretty miserably, and yeah, it sucks. So there's only one more left to cover. Yami, who I'd actually kind of like put closer to like Noitora, Xyloporo, Aranero, and that like kind of like irredeemable, like just kind of like I don't think anybody watching thought that there was any sort of hope for him. Especially like in my opinion, like you kind of knew the good guys were gonna win at the end, so like somebody was gonna kill Yami, and I guess it's implied that Byakuya and Kenpachi did, because like they were pretty much manhandling him like for the few minutes the fight was on screen, and he dies like at the end, like after like seeing like this like little hollow dog. I guess that's the soul of a dog, but anyways, he and like I guess like the dog is implied to be like his like only real friend in Hueco Mundo, or like his only like real companion, and so it sucks that like he dies like seeing like this like little dog, and it doesn't really dwell too much on like how like he like perceives this dog. Like we don't get like a chapter although that would be pretty cool in my opinion, about like Yami like meeting this dog and like hanging out with him. But like, he dies like kind of like as an angry like mess. Like he was clearly fighting for his survival, and he like was clearly like wanted to live, and no, he's dead. And unlike Stark, who chose to die. And so Tony Stark, not Coyote Stark. But yeah, so I know that I just talked about villains, and I know villains might seem like a bit of like a like I was talking about villains in the sense of the Espada. Like obviously Yamamoto is not a villain. Ulquiorra was a villain, and Gin was kind of a villain, but like it applies like pretty much everywhere there's death. Like if you want to look at I would say like the biggest representative of like Bleach deaths might be Kaname Tosin, or Kubo deaths rather. He dies after being like essentially sucker punched by Shuhei, not like actually punched, but like Shuhei kind of or Hisagi comes out of nowhere and impales him with his Zanpakuto and then activates it, like basically exploding his brain, and then he falls, and then he like monologues to Komamura and Hisagi about like I think like he kind of like apologizes for like what he's done and everything like that. And you kind of get the sense that like he might like actually join back up with Soul Society of like Fight Aizen, or he might like get the help he needs. But no, he just like explodes, like, and not even like a fiery explosion, like in like a hideous like flesh and blood explosion in the middle of his like conversation with them, in this middle of this like heartfelt moment. I remember like that like really catching me off guard like when I watched it. And then that's what prompts like Komamura to be like, I won't forgive you, Aizen. And so at first I thought that maybe like Aizen used a Kido, or that like he like somehow like used his spirit energy to like crush like the weakened Tosin. But I think, and I could be very very wrong here, and it actually could be one of those two things, but I want to say the light novels, and I haven't read the light novels yet, but I've read and watched stuff about them. I think it's implied that Tosin died of a soul suicide brought on by his holification, and that holification, as we know, was caused by Aizen, who like so that's why Komamura blamed Aizen. That's why he's like, I won't forgive you, Aizen. And so that's my Komamura impression. But anyways, so yeah, that's essentially like why I believe that like Bleach deaths are very different, and I than like what you see in like a lot of like anime, TV shows, manga, yeah, just comic books in general. And I know that like I only used Tony Stark's death in Endgame, but I'm imploring you, because like I just didn't want to spoil a lot of stuff for my audience, however many of you there might be. But like think about like what deaths that like shows and movies and whatnot that you've seen, like media that you've seen, like, and like which ones like would fall into like the Kubo death category. And I'm not gonna, I hopefully that doesn't catch on, because like I don't think Kubo exactly pioneered characters getting killed. But yeah, think about which ones are Kubo deaths and which ones are like more like the mainstream deaths, like the Tony Stark deaths, and just kind of like maybe examine for yourself like which kind of deaths did you think were like more impactful. And now I think it all boils down to context. Like, but yeah, that's essentially my analysis of the character deaths in Bleach, and I hope that those watching possibly learned something, and I hope you enjoyed. Most of all, this is my first actual video, if you don't want to count introduction videos, which I don't blame you if you like don't want to do. So this has been great. This has been very fun to make, and I'm very excited for the future of this channel. So thank you, and please, if you want to see more videos like this, feel free to like and subscribe. My goal is to have a video every week, and I look forward to seeing you. Thank you, and have a great day, and once again, thank you for watching.